The Nintendo Switch is taking the world by storm and has proven that Nintendo can bring it back once again. But the question is, what's next for the Nintendo Switch? And I'm not talking about what games are coming out next. I'm talking about what's coming next hardware-wise. And as soon as the Switch was released, people were asking the question, is there going to be a Switch XL? Now, really think about that. Okay, so the Nintendo 3DS had a 3DS XL, but XL stands for extra large, and of course the 3DS would look great if it was bigger, so they made a bigger version. Do you really want a bigger version of the Nintendo Switch? I highly doubt it. It would be like carrying a laptop around with you. But a smaller version of the Nintendo Switch that you can fit in your pocket, now we're talking. For this Switch file, we're going to talk about the Nintendo Switch Mini. As a marketing rule, generally if you make a very small successful product, say like phones for example, you make bigger versions of them to sell to people, like sell the idea of it has a bigger screen but it's thinner and so on and so on. And it works in reverse as well. If you make a very large product that's very successful, you want a mini version to sell to people so that they can carry it around and make it more portable. Now, although the Nintendo Switch is portable, you know, having a smaller version that fits in your pocket like a PlayStation Vita would be to great advantage to Nintendo. So just think a Nintendo Switch Mini or Nintendo Switch Pocket would sell like hotcakes. Think about how popular the Nintendo Switch is at the moment. Imagine if they suddenly said to you, hey, there's a version that does everything that the Nintendo Switch does at the moment, and you can plug it into your TV and use a controller and everything, but we're going to make it small enough to fit in your pocket, and the controls won't be compromised. You'll still be able to have the same things, and we're going to improve things for you, and we're going to make it slimmer. And probably cheaper as well. That would appeal to a lot of people. Now, the first thing that springs to mind is if they're going to make a mini version of the Nintendo Switch, then they will probably, by necessity of size, have to make the Joy-Cons smaller. Now that is a complaint, but if you look at the Joy-Cons themselves and you look at the amount of space on the side of the buttons, particularly on one side, you'll notice that there's a big space there, either on the left or the right hand side, depending on which Joy-Con you're using. So it's entirely possible to make a smaller Joy-Con but still keep the same buttons and thumbsticks in the same position, just shorter by about a centimetre or two, so that you can have a smaller screen and a pocket-sized Nintendo Switch. So if they decide to make a Nintendo Switch Mini, which seems kind of likely at the moment, then this is probably one of the things that you will see happen. You'll see essentially the same Joy-Cons but slightly shorter. And then if we're going to see this shorter version of the Joy-Cons, I presume they're going to make a Joy-Con Grip that's exactly the same, has the buttons in exactly the same place, same size buttons, same size thumbsticks as I said, only it will compensate for that little bit that's missing at the bottom. And if you think about this, this is actually a good thing, because if you look at the Nintendo Switch JoyCon Grip, you'll notice it's really long in the middle and goes down quite a way. So imagine if that was shorter, then the Nintendo Switch JoyCon Grip would look more like a normal controller. So in a way it kind of works, because you're not compromising the size, shape and spacing of the buttons. You're just simply taking off that big edge of plastic, and when you put it into a JoyCon Grip, it looks more like a controller. So that makes it slightly more appealing in one way and slightly less appealing in another way, because the individual Joy-Cons will be shorter. But how will they compensate for that if you want to use individual Joy-Cons themselves, just like you do say on snipper clips, where you put the Joy-Con rail on to extend the size and shape of one Joy-Con? Well, it's simple. They make a Joy-Con rail that basically adds a little bit on the bottom, so that you can then, once you slide it on, it will be the same size as a normal Joy-Con with a Joy-Con rail on. So really, it's not a tough fix or a tough sell to sell a Nintendo Switch Mini. One thing I can guarantee will happen if they make a Nintendo Switch Mini, and that is they will get rid of the bezel. So many people said when they first got it, and you know, at this point people don't really care about the bezel at the moment because it's a great product, but so many people commented when they first got it, first impressions, the bezel's thick, why doesn't the screen go to the edge of the actual tablet? Well, if they make a Nintendo Switch Mini, I imagine they're going to make it smaller by getting rid of the bezel, but not making the screen so much smaller. So you're getting a screen that's still quite big, maybe an inch smaller, and then you've got no bezel around the edges, which makes the whole actual device bigger. I would also imagine that if they do this, they're going to take away this Wi-Fi issue with one of the Joy-Cons, and fix a bunch of other tiny little issues. I'd imagine that they're going to fix the Wi-Fi issue where, although you are getting a fairly good signal, it still comes up as being quite a weak signal on the console itself. But the last thing I want to talk about with this Nintendo Switch Mini is the dock. Because really, when you think about it, if you try and imagine a Nintendo Switch dock but like a couple of inches smaller, it just looks kind of strange and silly, like it's going to fall over. And it needs to have enough space to vent the air, it needs to have enough space to kind of plug in all of the power cable and the HDMI cable. So I mean, they could go one of two routes really. They could keep the existing power cable and then have a very small HDMI end like the ones you use to plug into monitors for DSLRs, or they could make a different dock. And this intrigues me. I think they might make a different style dock that looks different, feels different, and functions slightly differently. I don't think you will, if they make a Nintendo Switch Mini, I don't think you will slot it into the dock with a piece in the front and a piece in the back like a sandwich the way it works now. I think it's going to work like, do you remember those iPod docks that you used to plug into and they would turn it into like a kind of little stereo system? It would have speakers on either sides. I think it'll be like that. I think it will fit on a slant at the very front of the dock into place, simple as that, and it will look very smooth and it'll be very smooth to operate. So there you go. That is today's Switch file, the Nintendo Switch Mini. I think it's very plausible that this will happen. If you think that a Nintendo Switch XL is going to come out with like a 10-inch screen, I really doubt that. I mean, you could be right. I don't know. But in my personal opinion, I think the Mini is way more likely than an XL version of the Nintendo Switch. Food for thought. But really, this is a mystery. And it is really intriguing. It's something that you really could believe could happen, and it might actually happen. But in the same way, it's something that still completely hasn't been confirmed, and that is what makes it a Switch file.